You're listening to Ripon Common Sense Radio.
That's right, where we take you well into the midnight hour with our special Art Bell Archives show happening tonight.
Absolute beginners came to Georgetown. They were wearing Harris tweed and pork pie hats. They'd slit your throat and throw you in the gutter. But it's all you can expect from men like that. The bus is bound for Niles Bend Harbor. The ladies wear perfume to scar your nose. And the only way to reach them is to scare them. But of that you know little, I suppose. It's a magical and mystical performance as you perambulate right down the road with your pockets full of stardust and perfection, and Jesus on your side and in your soul. She had rings on every finger and 10 bracelets, some touch with powers given by a sage. He had contemplated giving her his wristwatch. The time for him had long since gone its way. Of the city he would shuffle while spinning on his heels and chewing beef. He had promised her he'd be a vegetarian, but he could not control his lust for meat. Some say she left the streets for greater glory, but others said that she was big with child. Whatever was the truth, it did not matter. He would hunt her down and cut her with his smile. Last time he was seen was by the pawn shop. He traded 2 gold teeth for a sack of corn, and he would plant it on the outskirts of the city as a warning that he would someday return. Said he never found her and he's still looking. It is said he searches rivers for some sign, but the truth is that he caught her down in Georgetown with a Spaniard who had left his wife behind.
You're listening to Ripon Common Sense Radio.
That's right, where we take you well into the midnight hour with our special Art Bell Archives show happening tonight and every night this weekend, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. Tune in as we open up the Art Bell Archives and dive into the lost classics of a vocal treasure. We take a look at those stories and we bring them up to date and we share them with you. We ask for your input and your shout-outs, your call-ins as we go through the most amazing stories ever told. Tune in tonight and every night as we reinvestigate the Art Bell Archives live.
The Art Bell Archive Show, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, RiponCommonSense.com.
Ripon Rabbit Hole is a community-driven radio. At times the community comments may reveal prejudices and other beliefs that we or our sponsors do not condone. Views or opinions expressed by the community, callers, or guests, are those of the individual speaking and do not represent the views or opinions of this site. Ripon Common Sense content is intended for mature audiences only. Enjoy.
Let's do it. Good evening and welcome to another episode of the Ripon Rabbit Hole Live Show. I'm your host, AJ, the Ripon Rabbit. Give yourselves a round of applause for being smart enough to be here. Tonight, we dive deep down the rabbit hole into the world of the Mandela effect. In fact, revelations of ME. As I'll be joined with my special guests, Jerry Hicks, Eileen COLTS, and Kimberly Lynn Hanson. All of my guests this evening are featured speakers at this year's International Mandela Effect Conference. That's the second annual 2020 East Coast Mandela Effect Conference, live streaming online at imec.world, June 5th through the 7th, 2020. So buckle up your seatbelts, folks, because we're soaring through the revelations of ME tonight, Sunday, April 26th, 2020. I'm really excited to be joined this evening, and we're going to connect to our guests in just a moment. But a big shout out and a thanks to Moneybag73, who's allowed us to simulcast tonight's show on both his channel as well as Ripon Rabbit Hole. So we're going to be monitoring both of your chats, and hopefully we'll be able to acknowledge all of you. But the first person we have to acknowledge this evening is Queen of Swords. My top hat's off to you, Queen of Swords. You were the first in the room this evening. So, of course, you have the honors. Again, great to see Brenda Mitchell as well as Earth Daughter back with JoJo's. Not Chiquita, great to have you here. My Life DIY, as well as A&E Coins, Sister Sensi, Legendary, Bill White, May the Devil Rest, Marcy Chan, and a whole bunch of you, as well as Moneybag73 himself over there in his simulcast broadcast. So it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to open up the lines coming up in the second part of the program. We're going to take a few of your calls for some of this great panel that we've been able to assemble for this evening. We sure have assembled a curious lot of individuals this evening. We're going to connect now with Mr. Jerry Hicks. You know him as a.k.a. Dark Wolf of Dark Wolf's Den, who is a paranormal researcher with more than 25 years' experience and research under his belt. And, of course, the Mandela effect being a big part of that, as well as Eileen COLTS. And Eileen grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. She even spent time in the coconut jungles of Trinidad and Tobago. She was a radio personality for an NPR affiliate radio station in 1985. And she experienced her first Mandela effect in 1995 with Nelson Mandela springing back to life after she had been out to interview him in South Africa in 1985. And, of course, that's an amazing story I can't wait to ask about. And with the two of these wonderful people, also joined by Kimberly Lynn Hanson, whose art has graced the walls of Galleries Lafayette in Paris all the way to the stunning New York City skyline, where her work is illuminated 25 stories tall in Times Square. So please put a 1 in the chat room and help me to welcome all three of my special guests to the program. And without any further ado, good evening, Jerry, Eileen, Kimberly. It's an honor and a pleasure to have you here on the program this evening.
Well, thank you, sir. And I'm so glad to be here on the program and be joined by these two wonderful ladies.
Oh, thank you, guys. It's really great being here. It's so nice to see you, AJ, after listening in. It's like good old-fashioned radio, solid radio on YouTube.
Well, sometimes that doesn't always happen. Go ahead, Kim.
Oh, I just wanted to say hello. I'm happy to be here too.
It's great to have
I'm
all
happy to meet you,
three.
AJ.
Happy to meet all of you. In fact, this is really exciting because, and I'll preface this for this evening, I am new to the Mandela effect. I am newly affected, so to speak, and so many times you may hear me say things that I haven't understood yet are Mandela effect. So a lot of times Moneybags will say to me, boy, you know what you're saying is wrong. What you're saying is Mandela affected. But I was absolutely elated when I found out there's such thing as a Mandela effect conference. And Jerry Hicks, of course, you serve on the IMEC World team. You're an organizer. You were the master of ceremonies last year. Why don't you give us kind of some historical perspective on the conference itself?
Okay, so this is kind of a great story about really going after your dreams. Because what I wanted to do, I wanted to go to a conference that was being held, I want to say it was 2018, 2017, by Vanessa VA. But I wasn't able to make it to that conference. Well, I got mad. I couldn't go, and I decided if I couldn't go, I wanted to start one. But then I talked myself out of it 100 times. There's no way I could do that. Nobody would want to go. I wouldn't waste my time. Don't waste my, Finally, I said, okay, fine. What if I just, kind of kicked it off and tried? And if it fails, I can always just erase everything and pretend it never happened. No big deal. So I sent an email to Cynthia Sue Larson. And I said, look, Cynthia, I've never been to a conference a day in my life, never been involved with a conference, never set foot in the door of one. Matter of fact, the best I've done is seen one on YouTube. How would you like to hold one for the Mandela Effect community? Well, she was ecstatic. She said, hold on, give me a couple weeks. Let me see what I can put together. I've done conferences before. I can help you plan it. Cool. A couple weeks later, she pulls together such an amazing team. I just cannot speak enough about the core team we started with. Miss Kimberly Lynn Hanson was a part of that. Christopher Anatra, Cynthia Sue Larson, Lauren Cannell Pavelka, and of course, everybody knows Shane Robinson from Unbiased and On the Fence. We come together and created just an amazing, amazing conference that even blew my mind. What we were able to put together for this community was just above and beyond what a first-year conference should have been. It was just absolutely incredible. This year, we've decided to try to do it again. We were going to try to do 2 this year, I think. We may not end up doing 2. However, because of the current situation, we won't be meeting in person. We will be having it live, online, for absolutely free for anybody and everybody who wants to enjoy it. We're going to be on the imec.world site, as well as YouTube will have the International Mandela Effect Conference channel, where everybody and anybody can enjoy each presentation both live or at their own leisure.
And quite a lineup as well. And of course, this is June 5th through the 7th, correct?
Well, the dates actually are a little up in the air right now.
Okay, so there's still possibly room for changing of schedules. And what's important is that if you're listening to the broadcast tonight, that you make sure to visit imec.world and enter. One of the first things that comes up is to enter in your email address. And it's important that you do that because you'll get the updates direct from imec.world as things will inevitably change. And I found it completely exciting because, of course, I've watched the conference from last year. And Kimberly, your presentation as well as a former veteran speaker at the IMEC conference. You even started off with a little bit of butterflies and a little bit of nervousness. Do you feel like this year perhaps you're going to be a little bit more ready to put on a presentation?
Oh, you're so sweet for noticing that and for bringing up the question again. I don't know what I'm going to feel. And I think it would kind of ruin the fun for me to predict that I won't have butterflies. I think butterflies are a symbol of, moving over an old limitation. So how about I say, I hope I have butterflies.
I love that. And of course, last year you were there with Jerry. You were one-on-one with all the fantastic people that were able to go to that conference and partake in that, camaraderie. Can you talk a little bit about what that was like? Obviously, this year are going to be a little different, but better for most of us who can't attend. But can you talk a little bit about some of that feeling, the camaraderie that was shared in that experience?
Right. That, again, is a really, really good question. We all came in not really knowing each other. Cynthia had pulled us all kind of separately in, and I'm not sure if from what I gathered from what I witnessed was we all met the morning of the first day of the conference at breakfast. And it seemed like none of us knew each other at all. And it was an instant love affair. I mean, I remember seeing Shane for the very first time. I didn't know his name. I didn't know any of the people that were going to be on the panel. And when I saw Shane for the first time, and I didn't know his name, I didn't know his background, I didn't know anything about him, I just began to cry. And he began to cry as well. And we were looking at each other like, why are we crying? And we didn't know. But it was that kind of really soft compassion and open-heartedness and open-mindedness. There was something within the invisible part of all of us that knew somehow we came together to bring something to the table. And I'm not sure any of us truly knew what that was, even before doing it, during doing it, and after. I think we're still processing exactly what that specialness was.
And again, part of that specialness is just the fact that you were actually there together with one another. And of course, 2020 going to be a little bit of a different scenario. In that digital bridge, I feel like you're going to be able to still make those same connections with a much broader audience this time, a much larger audience of people that I think will be able to connect and feel that same of what you speak about. So hopefully that will be something that can be included in the experience and in the feeling.
Well, thank you, TJ. That means a lot to me because it sounds impossible. So the fact that you picked up on it gives me inspiration to see and tune into that potential that can it be better? I love that mystery.
How good can it get, as Cynthia Sue Larson would say? Eileen COLTS, I have to apologize to you. I have mispronounced your name from every version of E with the I and the I before the E, but it's Eileen. Is that correct? Am I saying it right?
Yeah, that's okay. You called me Eileen a few times when I've been in the chat.
I've bounced back and forth, and I have no idea. Sometimes I'm a little bit dyslexic
I'm so
with
used to that.
Now, you're a newbie
I'm used to that. Most people call me like Ellen or Elaine, or they make up some combination of it, which is totally fine with me, because it's a Celtic name, and it's spelled strangely. Like, why would Eileen start with an E? It just doesn't make sense. So
I just think of that ABBA song, Come On Eileen, and that's how I've embedded it in. Now, you're a new speaker this year. You've been added to the roster. You've been added to the list. You've got your spot there in presentations, and what an amazing thing to be a part of. I'm so excited, and I can't wait to hear all of your presentations. But let's talk a little bit, since you're new to the IMEC World presentations. Let's talk a little bit about your background. You have an impressive background where you were raised in several parts of the world, and you've worked in broadcast in this media for quite some time. And in 1985, you were set to interview Nelson Mandela. Do I have that correct? Was that how you were awoken to the...
You do. And well, it took 10 years after that for me to wake up to a phenomenon that didn't have a name. And I didn't know of Cynthia Sue back in 95. It wasn't until I came in contact with her work in the early 2000s with the book Reality Shifters that I realized it had a name, but I thought the name was reality shifting, which she credits to PMH Atwater, the great expert in near-death experiences. She's the one who coined the term reality shifting, and she's been talking about it who knows how long, maybe since the 80s, easily. And when I went to South Africa, I was still working for Loyola University Radio. I was the news director there, and I had this opportunity. It's before I joined National Public Radio in Chicago. I had this great opportunity to go to South Africa, and I thought, well, I'm going to really make this worthwhile. And I applied to interview Nelson Mandela, who was still incarcerated, and he was very, very unwell at that point. So in South Africa, life imprisonment means until you die, unlike the United States and other countries where it might mean 30 years. So they were debating and meeting, and there was an outcry for him to be released on humanitarian grounds because he was so sick. So they were kind of like deciding whether or not to release him early because of his illness so he could, pass at home with his loved ones. And I was told I could meet with him. And when I got there, I was denied access. And I thought, oh, God. And they said it was because he was too sick for interviews. And you always wonder when you're dealing with government authorities, like, is that true or is that not true? But instead, they put me in with Adrian Vlok, who was at that time the Deputy Minister of Defense. But prior to that, he was in charge of the South African prison systems. So he was in charge with the incarceration of Nelson Mandela. And I did get a really solid interview from him about the reasons why he was incarcerated and the reasons he should go home now and the reasons they weren't letting him out yet. And I returned with that. And then the next year, when I graduated in 1985, I joined National Public Radio. And within a couple of years, I worked my way up in the newsroom to be the morning news anchor. And I recall in either around 1987, I would do the Chicago news, but right behind me was the national and international broadcasts from NPR, and we would keep joining. We would go in and out with those newscasts all morning long. And I recall hearing a Washington report on the death of Nelson Mandela in prison just weeks before he was to be released. They had decided to release him on humanitarian grounds, and he died tragically just weeks before. So that was embedded in my mind because I wouldn't hear that broadcast once. I would hear it all day long and then the next couple of days as well. So fast forward, I went over to cover the fall of the wall in Berlin, and I started to work for all the European news networks for radio, like you.
You were in Deutsche Welle as well over there.
After that, I moved. I was in Deutsche Welle. I worked for Canadian Broadcast Corp, of Radio France. I worked for Vatican Radio. You guys, they have their own international radio network.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I never met the Pope. So, everybody says, did you meet the Pope? I'm like, no, it's all done by radio. It's all remote, So fast forward, I was based in London. It's 1995. And I turn on the television and lo and behold, there is Nelson Mandela as alive as anything with the Spice Girls. Now, he just did some kind of a PR thing where he spoke downtown in London, Trafalgar Square, with the Spice Girls. And by this time I'm married and I'm telling my husband, this isn't possible. He's dead. And he's going, what do you mean he's dead? And I'm like, no, this is not possible. Nelson Mandela died around 1987 in prison. And, he just thought I had a very bad memory. So I had to chalk it up to just a bad memory. I couldn't prove that he died in 1987, but I will tell you this. I grew up with this because my mom was Mandela affected in the 1970s. And she would tell me that so-and-so who died yesterday didn't really die yesterday like a celebrity. She died 5 years ago. And this is who attended her funeral, and this is what they wore, and this is what happened. She would know exactly because she read all those magazines at the cashier stand. So she knew which celebrities were dead, and they were constantly popping back to life for her.
Oh, sure. And, that's the whole premise of what Cynthia Sue Larson describes as that alive again phenomenon. And your story, of course, coming in comments from the chat rooms, what a fascinating, interesting story that you had that wonderful opportunity to, have that moment where, how does that, how do you make sense of how those timelines? What is your go-to explanation for what is the case with Nelson Mandela as far as this phenomenon has occurred to you specifically in that story? What is your go-to response?
Well, if I had a small Mandela effect and it didn't really matter, I would just brush it off as faulty memory. As you do, because we are human and we do have faulty memories. We're not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So Mandela effects can be faulty memories, unless millions of other people remember them exactly the way you do, and then suddenly they leave the realm of faulty memory that just belongs to you, and they go into this phenomenal world of Mandela effect. And I was just fortunate that my first one in 1995 was so big. And I was also very fortunate that coincidentally, they would call the phenomenon, they would name it after Nelson Mandela, but not until 2009, when Fiona Broome was, I don't know her, I've just done my research, and she was standing in the green room in California, which must be some kind of a lounge. And they were talking about, when do you remember Nelson Mandela dying? And they, some thought it was the early 90s, because there's many Mandela affected people who believe he died in 1991, and there's an English language book in South Africa called English Alive, and it has a page on Nelson Mandela's funeral from 1991. But then there were other people like me in that group who remembered him dying in 1986, 87.
Yeah, I have the memories too, and I remember the funeral. I remember my grandmother crying, and I just remember this tremendous amount of sadness over his death. And I recall those images. Yet, as we're told today, and we find out, in 2013, he's alive and well with the Spice Girls. So, Kimberly, did you listen to the?
With the Spice Girls, yeah.
There's a little bit of a delay between us, so I don't mean to cut anyone off, but I want to go back to Kimberly. Do you remember the Spice Girls and Nelson Mandela? Was this story an effect for you as well? Do you remember the death of Nelson Mandela?
I don't. I'm younger-ish person, and I don't have any strong memories of him dying, and also I'm an artist, so I pay attention to things that most people don't pay attention to. So my memories when it comes to pop culture or mass understanding of things, I usually wasn't paying attention enough. And I was always, how could I describe it? I've always been available to be wrong at any point. And so if somebody remembered something some way and I remembered a different way, then I was really easy to let things go and go, in that way. And I'd always believed people understood reality in their own way. So if I was being described something in a certain way and I didn't recall it being that way, that was cool with me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And when you find these types of moments, like Eileen tells this story, which is very far back in the time frame, do you find that Mandela effects for you, that it was something way earlier on in your life that was part of your Mandela effect awakening, or what was it that woke you up to the fact, hey, a lot of people remember things that seem to be different now?
For me, it happened. I received my first solo exhibition in New York City in 2012, and the opening, it was to run through December. And so I wasn't an artist before that point. I got offered that exhibition because I was a tattoo artist, and they knew my work through there. And so I created artwork specifically for that show, and I was not an artist before that. And it was being in the studio for extended periods of time in the unknown, trying to create work that was stunning enough to hold clout in New York City.
Sure.
That I threw myself into the unknown, and it was in that experience of spending days and days by myself in a creative state that strange things began to happen within my reality within the studio. Things would change. Information would come to me that I had no background in. What else would happen? Jerry, you've witnessed this, how the artwork moves.
Like the Mona Lisa is a Mandela effect as well. Now, were you familiar with that change, or was that something that you became aware of and went, "No, wait a second, that's not how I remember the smile"?
Right. I learned a lot about the Mandela effect from doing the conference and being within the community. Before Cynthia asked me to do the conference, I was lightly familiar with the Mandela effect. It crossed my plate because I was familiar with physics at the macro scale, at the micro scale. And when the Mandela effect crossed my plate in a paper, that's when I started to do a bit of research. And because the information was quite disorganized, I didn't go any further into it. However, as I explained lightly and just briefly, information does come to me whether I ask about it or not sometimes. And so some information did come to me in regards to the Mandela effect, and I sent it to Cynthia months before the conference. Only because I sent it to Cynthia because I didn't feel it was my information. It felt like a treat for somebody who'd been working in that field for a long time. So I sent it to her in hopes that it might be useful for her. And instead of that, she asked me to present it at the conference. So that's how I got involved. And so until I was doing the conference, Jerry's laughing, until I did the conference and I fell in love with this community, I really didn't go too far into any of the details. So the Mona Lisa, all of these things were taught to me from all of them. So that's how I know about it. Again, when they are presenting those sort of things to me, because I'm so close, there is something, if you're very close to the information, say, the heart has moved. A heart doctor who's been working in the field of cardiology wouldn't have noticed that the heart has moved. And so when it comes to all of the art details, to me, they've always been that way because I'm so close to those details.
Interesting.
The quantum Zeno effect is what it's called.
Yeah, and you're from the artist's point of view, like you said, when you're looking at an empty canvas and you're waiting for some sort of a message to come through and present itself in that way, I can only imagine some of the messages that you've stored away that haven't necessarily made their way out yet. And that's perhaps, Jerry, the reason why IMEC World chose the topic or the theme, if I'm saying that right, this year, to be Revelations of Mandela Effect. Jerry, can you give us some insight as to what was the theme decided in that way for? What is this Revelations aim to achieve, and what will these great speakers aim to reveal?
Well, in the beginning, we weren't quite sure we were going to have a theme, and then we got talking about it, and somebody suggested Revelations because, the big Revelations Mandela effect. And I got to thinking about, it has revealed a lot to me and to a lot of others in the community. And then there's so much more yet to be revealed. There's so many ways we could take this topic. I think it's just so brilliant. the revelations of the Mandela effect. What is it to reveal? What has it revealed? Just all these questions. So I thought that was a really, really good theme to go with, especially given the situation at hand right now and everybody talking about we're in Revelations, we're in the end of the world. And it's a way to take the fear porn spin off of it a little bit and bring it more into a conscious awareness, kind of Mandela effect type theme, a more fun fucking, what's being revealed opposed to the world's going to end.
Right, the doomsday scenarios. And it is 100% virtual, meaning all the speakers will gather virtually as well, correct? It's not, there's not any gathering. So if anybody was planning on heading out to the East Coast, you can rearrange your plans if that was on your schedule. But again, there is no, it's 100% virtual, 100% free.
That is absolutely correct. And because it is going to be live online, I personally am calling this a worldwide conference. The East Coast, Connecticut is still open and available. We're going to rain check that one. So we will have that one again to meet up in person for all my East Coast friends out there that were looking forward to this year. I know one guy who's very, very upset. He hangs back there with us in the backstage lounge. He's very upset. He was planning on going. So yes, we will be having it in person next go around if we don't have another lockdown, albeit. It will be online. It will be free. It will be live for anybody who wants to join. And please do not show up in Connecticut. They might not be too happy you're there.
And I think, that's the, the fun part is that so many more people now are going to have that opportunity to be able to connect with the IMEC world. That's IMEC.world. community. Again, make sure that you enter in your email address and you're going to get the updates as dates are still yet to be determined, as well as the entire structure. But it's an incredible lineup. How many speakers in total are there, Jerry? Do you know off the top of your head?
So in total, we have 15 speakers. We have the 5 from last year, our original base 5, and we've added 10 more, including a shaman, a couple reporters, scientists. We've got people from all over the board. You guys are not going to want to miss this.
And again, as an international community, both of you, Eileen and Kimberly, both being international in your points in life as far as where you've lived, where you've worked. Have you noticed that in other parts of the world, the Mandela effect is affecting people in, say, Europe or in other parts of the world? Either one of you.
Well, I have a lot of friends still in Europe, and they are not as affected as my friends in America are. But that may reflect who I know in Europe, and I may know more, more open, forward, experimental people in America. But it tends to make me think that it's growing here quicker. But I can't really say that because I've made so many friends in our community from Canada, loads, and there's a few in Australia and New Zealand as well. So I'm kind of out on that one. I don't really have a strong answer. Kimberly?
Because I wasn't part of the community before I did the conference, my friends internationally have the same understanding as my friends in the States or Canada. They're more corporate-based, scientific understanding of things, and I'm the kooky artist who brings into conversation things like the Mandela effect.
And I was always a kooky reporter. I was respected in news, but if a wacky book or story came along, it made it through everybody's hands until it wound up on my desk. And Jerry, I think you're kind of that way too, right?
Absolutely. News of the Strange. I've always made it a point to pick up the News of the Strange and present it. If I find something that's like an odd news story or like way out of place for normal, quote unquote, yeah, I will definitely. I love News of the Weird. If I could, I've thought about doing my own news desk show like that. I've tried a couple times. I just can't keep the articles coming quick enough to to really make it feasible at this time.
And-
As far as your question, AJ, I have heard Moneybags has talked to us about Spanish Mandela effects and how they've been noticed in that culture and language.
Mm-hmm.
I've also heard people from, if you look on YouTube, there's a whole lot of videos in Hindi. So I have a feeling that it's breaking out over there pretty well too. I don't understand Hindi, so for those who do, you might want to go watch those.
And
I think it is a worldwide phenomenon. I think it's growing a little slower there than it does here. Probably because we're a little more open-minded in this country, at least some of us. We have more, quote, conspiracy theorists in this country opposed to the rest of the world, I would say.
And I
think we have more truthers. And I think once you go down the truther rabbit holes of conspiracy theories, you're going to bump into a Mandela effect rabbit hole really quickly. So that may be why.
And they do all seem to connect with each other, where all of a sudden you might go down one direction but pop up in another one, and then like all of a sudden this wave of S's that seem to change words and brand names, and everything is centered around an S. And now the latest wave, I think, is something really big with the letter E or hyphens in between things. Now, Kimberly, did you always have a hyphen between your web address name, or is that a Mandela effect?
I did. That's
good.
We can all put our hearts at rest.
If you're just joining us this evening, our guests are all wonderful members of the IMAC World Team. We're talking about the International Mandela Effect Conference, the second annual conference, coming up this June, and it's going to be made available live via the internet. We've got a lot more to come up in the second part of the program, including your calls. We're going to open up the wild card line and let a few of you come in with your questions, or if you have any comments relating to anything regarding the International Mandela Effect Conference or any one of our guests, by all means. I'm going to put that number up on the screen and give you guys an opportunity to interact with us. Again, a special thanks to Moneybag73 for allowing us to simulcast over there on Moneybags' YouTube channel, as well as the Ripon Rabbit Hole. So we're going to take a short break. We'll be back in just a few moments here on Ripon Common Sense Radio. Don't touch that dial. If you've enjoyed Revelations of ME up to this point, make sure you thumb up that video, ring that bell, and hit that subscribe button. We're here every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday evening, bringing you the very best in common sense radio, the Ripon Rabbit Hole. We'll be back again next week with our special monthly installment, kicking off the first weekend of May, our Mandela Monthly, Saturday, May 2nd. With co-host Moneybags73. We'll also be joined that evening with a very special guest, Dr. Carl Callahan. It's going to be a wonderful evening of Mandela Effects, just like tonight. So make sure you mark your calendars and join us for Mandela Monthly, Saturday, May 2nd, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. Like I said, we kick off the weekends around here on Thursday nights. We're here every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night. All shows start at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. You can hop on over to the riponrabbithole.com and jump on our mailing list. We'll send you out our weekend schedule every Thursday morning. You'll know exactly what shows are in line. While you're over there, take the time to explore our community. You'll find our rabbit hole groups as well as the Backstage 24/7 VIP lounge. It's a fantastic way to meet up with additional people that have, interest in a lot of the subjects that we cover, from the Mandela effect to time travel to even UFOs and psychedelics like we did last night. Either way, it's a great community over there at the Ripon Rabbit Hole. We invite you all to stop over and share time with us, as time is worth sharing together. We'll be back to our special guests' Revelations of Mandela Effect from the IMAC.World team, Jerry Hicks, Eileen Coates, and Kimberly Lynn Hanson. A lot more to go, including your calls. That's right. We're going to open up the lines in the second part of the program, give you guys a chance to call in if you've got a comment related to the Mandela effect. If you've got a question for Jerry, Eileen, or Kimberly, you're going to get that opportunity to ask it live on air this evening. I'll be opening up that line and announcing that number shortly here in just a few moments as we return back now to Revelations of Mandela Effect, Sunday, April 26, 2020, right here on Ripon Common Sense Radio.
But the truth is that he caught her down in Georgetown with a Spaniard who had left his wife behind.
All right, so I have now added that telephone number to the broadcast. It should be visible in your YouTube window if you're listening on YouTube. If you're listening on air at Ripon Common Sense Radio, you can call the wild card line. It's 702 500 1658. That number again, 702 500 1658. Boy, those breaks and this time really kind of goes kind of fast, guys, doesn't it?
Extremely. That took no time at all.
It really does. Before you know it, we're through the first half, and we're, that's how it's going to be when it comes to June, too. The reality is that in just less than 40 days, this conference is going to kick off. And before you know it, it's going to be over. So, Jerry, what is it that you and your team are doing behind the scenes? I mean, you've got a lot of work on your hands to juggle all of this and put all of this together. Talk to us a little bit about how administratively you've been using this time wisely.
So it's really been nice to have the downtime. I got to say, a lot of people are upset about this lockdown. It has really given me a chance to focus on stuff for IMEC that I would not have been able to focus on if I was working regular hours. So I got to say, it is a blessing in that aspect. We had a meeting the other day. We had all of our speakers together. Let me tell you, 15 people in one room, that's a fun conversation.
Oh, I can imagine.
We had
a Zoom room. A Zoom room.
A Zoom room. Absolutely,
right.
A Zoom room.
Let's clarify.
We had a great conversation. It was wonderful. Everybody's working so very, very hard to pull this together. We've got people that are working on the video production team. We've got people that are working on marketing. We've got people that are working on making sure all the speakers are coordinated. I got one person, Cynthia, is so amazing. She will make sure all the people are coordinated. She sends emails out at least once a week, let everybody know what's going on. I mean, she's really, really the glue that holds a lot of that together as far as getting information out. Miss Kimberly Lynn Hanson's been really good about contacting our speakers here recently over some recent changes we've been looking into making to the upcoming schedule. As well as myself, like I said, I'm just trying to write my talk. I've been doing research. I've been a paranormal researcher for over 25 years, as you said, my bio. But the last 3 years, I have been so focused on Mandela effect that I ain't looked at anything else. Now I'm going back and I'm looking into these case files that I've missed over the last couple of years in a topic that, like, I don't want to give too much away, but in a topic that has just really always been near and dear to my heart. And I've followed it for years. So I've been catching up on research and getting a talk written and trying to get the name out there, getting, trying to get sponsorships like with you here, AJ. And the whole team's just been working every bit as hard as they can. Shane's been working to help promote us. They're just working as hard as they can for the community. And I got to say, I could not be more proud to work with the team. I say it a lot, that is just 100% passionate about this community as a whole.
Chris Sinatra as well. And
Chris Sinatra, man, Mr. Chris is, he's been doing radio interviews, doing the circuit for us.
Evan and Moneybags, and I mean, the list goes on. And I think what is so cool is that it's doubled, if not tripled in size in the last year, and it's bound to happen again. It's bound to just keep growing and growing and growing. So let's entertain a call from the wild card line, the 985 caller. You're on the air with Kimberly, Eileen, and Jerry. Go ahead.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, how you doing?
Very well. How are you?
I'm fine.
Did you have a question or a comment? Okay, apparently not. I guess he hung up. So you guys have been...
Hey, Colin, glad to hear from you.
Yeah, well, thank
hello, whoever you are. Thanks for listening.
It happens from time to time. As you guys are putting your presentations together, Jerry, you're actually doing a presentation this year too, right? You've got your own dedicated presentation. Have you really been plugging and playing with thoughts? Talk to us a little bit about your process of putting together your presentation, Eileen. Of course, this is going to be your first one for the IMEC conference. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing to really make sure that you're not offering parts from your presentation to other people. Are you communicating so you're not covering a lot of the same topics and things like that?
Well, actually, we haven't spoken about it except during our last Zoom room meeting, we got to give an overview. Each of the speakers got to give an overview of the presentation, but Cynthia Sue had already asked us all to write 200 words on what our presentation was, and then she circulated that amongst all the speakers. So it was funny because none of us seemed to have covered the same ground. Did you guys notice that too? We were like all covering kind of a unique area of the Mandela effect. It just worked out that way.
Well, what's neat is even though all the areas are covered, like you said, a lot of the talks really do play off of each other. Like mine and Akranos talk really play off each other. And I didn't know that until the circulation came around. I didn't know we even had the same topic in our heads. But everything really does flow together, like especially the way the schedule is set up, and it wasn't set up like that originally. Everything is building one off another, it looks like to me.
Yeah, it's like falling into an organic, symbiotic way. And I'm going to plug my book. I wrote a book with Shane. I do live meditations with Shane Robinson on his channel every Saturday night. It's called The Power of One, and we do earth healing meditations. And we've been together for a couple of years on YouTube, even though we have our own channels. And Shane Robinson is a presenter. He's an original presenter from last year as well. And he and I got together with Vanessa VA, a big name in the Mandela Effect community, and Spirit Walker from Australia. His name's Paulo Pinto. And we wrote a book that we started in 2018 and we published at the end of 2019 called Mandela Effect, Friend or Foe. And the same thing happened in that book that happened. Oh, thank you, Jerry. He's actually holding up a copy. Thanks. It just fell together and we didn't repeat it. We didn't even have to check that we were covering each other's turf or ground or angle. It just all came together and it fit together organically, and we didn't cover the same material twice.
Right.
It just happened that way.
I love how that kind of synchronicity works it into these great minds coming together to work on that type of a project together. And Kimberly, how about for yourself having to, come back for the second year in a row? Are you finding a new direction? Will you take your presentation in a new way as well?
That is an interesting question. My creative process, even with the art, is to let it make itself. I like to learn from the work as I go. There's something to me about just talking, and this is in no disregard to anyone else. It's just my creative process, and what I found joy in is if I'm presenting something to people and I think I know everything about it, it's like I'm talking at them. And from the beginning of making my work in 2012, and just leaning into the unknown and being so brave and trusting of it and watching how it does make itself and the evolution within myself from start to finish, to putting things on the wall, to seeing guests interacting with it. Like, there's 4 completely different evolutions of myself that I witness within that process. So to give that process up, I would feel, for lack of better words, it would be sinful, because it's treated me so well. And I can honestly say, in listening to the other presenters with their, and I'm putting this in quotations, their awakenings and the trauma that came with it, somehow with mine, which I didn't even know was an awakening, as it was happening, because it was so graceful and I was given so much and my life is so abundant. I need to respect that process. Mm-hmm. And so I have no idea what I'm presenting yet. It hasn't been delivered to me. And I probably won't know till the very last moment. I can honestly say that. Again, that's the exercise of trust that I've given myself to. And it's always, every single time, blown my mind.
And that's so awesome. That is just so cool. And that's the excitement that is IMEC.world, because you have no idea until you get there and until you experience it what we're going to be in store for. And I think that is the ultimate excitement. Again, if you have a comment or a question for any of our guests this evening, or a comment on the Mandela effect in general, you can call our wild card line 702-500-1658. We'll go to the 941 area code. You're on the air with Jerry, Kimberly, and Eileen. Go ahead, 941.
Hi there, y'all. This is Doron.
Hi, Doran. How are you? Welcome. Thanks for calling in.
Hi.
I have a question I would like to hear y'all discuss, and I'll listen to it offline. I began watching Quantum Businessman, and he started posting recently. And within his first 2 videos, he explains that he and his company wrote and manage restaurant software, and the software is what they use to order food and dry goods and so forth. For example, Stouffer's stovetop stuffing, which many of you know does not exist in this universe. It did. It doesn't anymore. But anyway, his software had it and has it. So he wrote it that way. And when his customers began calling in asking, where are these products that I used to order all the time? They're not there anymore. He went back, and several of his employees were aware as well. Now, he has a few other films after that, and they're all very interesting. But my question now, apparently, according to what he has told us, there are many people that are Mandela affected without the basic knowledge of it yet. So have you guys had experience running into people like this, or you've got calls from people like this? And basically, most of us remember that when we first discovered this, it was a total shock. It took me like 3 days to calm down enough where I could actually think straight.
Yeah.
But all of us have this reaction, and that's why there's so many people skipping around all through some really terrible web pages that don't have any information, and they purport to have the answer or whatever. And unfortunately, these poor people that are just coming to it are scared to death and led astray, and they don't know what's going on. Have you guys seen this? Will you address this in your conference? And besides that Mandela Effect movie that came out recently, which I believe is not going to be good for us, I'm afraid it's going to be detrimental, but I want to hear you guys discuss what you know about it, and I'll listen to it offline. Thank you.
Thank you, Doran. Thank you. Anybody want to take the
well,
first?
Before you go, Doran,
He's already gone. But yeah.
I was going to say, before you go, Doran, I really appreciate hearing from you, but I see you all the time over in the backstage and never get to hear from you. You always have audio problems, so it's a pleasure to actually hear from you. I appreciate you calling in, man.
Cool.
Anybody want to relate to the question?
I think we all could. I'll go fast. Somebody who attended the conference last year, a really good friend of all of ours, Suso. He has a channel, and he's also the proprietor of the Silver Dollar Saloon, very famous saloon, haunted saloon. Yeah, I think it's in Leadville. I can't remember what town it's in.
Leadville.
Yeah, and thank you. And he wrote a book on his personal experiences of the Mandela Effect, and it's a really good book. It's called something like Mandela Effect Through the Timelines. I don't have it in front of me, but Suso, Antheo, I don't even know his whole last name.
I think it's Mind Over Matter, isn't it?
Mind Over Matter, yeah. That's it. And the reason I bring him up is because if he's behind the bar, he'll just start doing a quiz with people, strangers. And 9 times out of 10, they're Mandela affected. There it is. Jerry's showing us the book, Mind Over Beyond Matter. And he will just quiz strangers constantly because he's in the right, environment to do so. And 9 times out of 10, they are Mandela affected, but they didn't know it until they stepped into that saloon and met Suso. And they walk away with a whole new reality paradigm.
That's, it's mind-blowing to think that that's, how a majority of the people that you come across, seem to be, especially if they've not heard this. Is that your experience as well, Kimberly?
My experience, because I think I'm in a really, really beautiful sweet spot with this whole thing, because I am so close to the community through my recent experience, and I'm so in love with the people I presented with, and also I'm on the outside, so I would not classify myself as affected even, and so I do have this really beautiful inside-outside viewpoint, and I get to share information with people who have no clue about it, and then get to speak with them a few weeks later, a few months later, and see how they process the information. And, within those initial conversations and presenting the scientific potential explanation of how it is possible, they trust me so much because they've known me for so long and know my work outside of the conference so well that it's more of a compassionate conversation of look how cool reality is. And so they receive the information very well. And what's interesting to me is in that moment of receiving, that's really beautiful, hearts are connecting. What happens weeks after? What happens months after? Does it actually change a paradigm? How does a paradigm organize that information? And what is human evolution? And there's so many times where they have their memory and they realize it's different than the evidence that is presented now, and it's ignored. It's just completely ignored after months and months and months, because reality, I'm putting that into quotations, reality kind of begins, and reason begins to overshadow their everyday lives, and think, does it really matter if a Mandela effect is real or not?
Right.
And that's interesting to me, and especially in the moments that the world is joined in collectively right now. And can we ask, how does it matter that things can change instantly if we look or not look at things in a certain way so that they can change for the better? That's interesting to me.
Absolutely. And as the caller points out, with Christopher Natra and his software, even things like avocados and the names of avocados change. And I was in a conversation earlier today with Moneybags, and he said, did you ever notice how, like, you'll tell somebody, ask them, what do you remember about Haas avocados? And they'll spell it, the old way. And then you'll say, well, that's not how it's spelled anymore. And then they, oh, yeah, that's right. And they immediately, as he put it, I think he called it, they take the download. Jerry, have you noticed this is the case where people take the download, so to speak, and change and backpedal on their own explanations?
I did. I spoke about this at the conference last year. I have noticed that so you got a couple different groups of people. You've got the people that will go, oh, yeah, that's right, it was like that, and will accept it. You've got those that will, like, automatically, nope, that's not how I meant it. Then you got this weird group. You got this group that will agree with you at first, and then they'll stare off into the distance for a minute. And then they'll come back to reality and pretty much give you the exact Wikipedia definition of whatever it may be. It is the strangest thing ever. And I can't explain it. I'm a logical guy. And I'm trying to put logic to an illogical phenomenon. I know that. But I can't explain that. I have had that situation. To answer the caller's question, Chris Sinatra and his software company, you're right, the Stofers, the Haas, the different brand names. Go through a grocery store. I didn't realize how many food items there really are.
Oh,
there
yes.
are a lot of affected food items. He pointed that out. Now, the people. You asked about the people, caller. I have a really interesting situation. So I work in the public. I'm a desk clerk at a hotel. So I'm very in the public, around the people all the time, around the lobby. So I come around into the lobby one evening, and there's a group of people that were grandparents' age. I don't want to be mean, but, older, grandparents' age. And they were discussing I Love Lucy. And one of them, just as loud as he could, said, Lucy, you got some explaining to do. And I just could not help myself. I said, you know what? It's funny, guys. So I was just watching Lucy the other day, and I can't find anywhere where he says that line. Like, oh, no, he said it all the time. Well, I can't find it. Maybe you should look into that. And I just walked off. I have found it is not good to really force it with people anymore. I'll drop these subtle hints along the way. Oh, well, really, I couldn't find that last time I checked. You should look into that. Maybe I'm wrong. To give them a way to prove you wrong. And they would prove themselves right. It's so fun to do. And one last point before, and I apologize if I'm rambling. The ME movie. Caller brought up the ME movie and how he thinks it could be a bad thing for us.
Mm-hmm.
I disagree.
Okay.
And I disagree only to the fact of I didn't like the ending personally. That's a personal thing. I think they could have done a little bit more with the ending, or should have put maybe 9 endings for all the theories we have. I don't know. But I think it's a good thing to get the idea out there, to show people kind of what we are going through. If you look at us, each one of us as that main character, we win in the end. We don't lose. We don't screw stuff up. We don't blow anything up. Well, a little bit, but still, we win in the end. So it's not like it's making us look like total dolts.
Right.
We actually look like good guys here. And it shows real Mandela effects at the beginning. It gives people an idea of what we really experience. Look, things aren't what we remember. The photograph scene I thought was brilliant. I'm not going to spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen the movie. Those who have, you know what I mean. Personally, I think it's a good thing now. There is an argument I have heard that it's a movie. People are going to say, oh, it's a movie. That's just a movie. It's fiction. How many fictional pieces have we seen that match reality? There's been quite a few movies that have to be fiction only for the fact of it's questionable historically. There's no, quote, evidence historically one way or the other. So you have to make a fictional movie about a real thing. I've seen that based on a true story. How many times have you guys seen based on a true story?
Yeah, it happens quite a bit. It happens quite a lot. In fact, and that perhaps is the theme. Revelations. You bring up how perhaps in the end, so to speak, and Revelations being, of course, the end. And can you believe it? We've come close to the end of our show this evening, and my top hat's off to all of you for taking the time to be here this evening with us. And I know, Eileen, you had said that you had this book that you did with Vanessa VA as well as some of the other people, and Vanessa is in the chat room as well as Stober 51, Fuck You Then, Juanito 1975, Ruben Orsoko, if I said that right. Great to see Michael Fontaine and Morpheus and PG2424 over there in Moneybags room paying attention as well. Prelim, Faye Walker, Earth Daughter, Michael Badger, Bill White, and of course a whole list of goes on and on. If you would be so kind in both of those chat rooms to put a Ripon Rabbit Hole 1 in the chat room for our guests this evening for taking their time to come on and be with us and give us this insightful information to a very exciting event coming up in June, the International Mandela Effect Conference. Eileen, you're an author. You have other books as well, correct? You want to mention some of those books and tell people where people can find those books?
Well, we live in a world where the easiest place to find them is Amazon. I wish it was go down to your local bookstore at the end of your street and you'll find it there. But right now, my books are on Amazon, and I'm grateful to Amazon to provide that international platform. And my other book is a very small one. It's called 40 Days and 40 Nights Manifestation Key. It's very biblical, but the magical number 40 has appeared in many other religions around the world. So it's not strictly biblical, and it's how to manifest quickly. And I think that really fits in nicely with the Mandela effect. And let me just give a quick shout out to Vanessa VA. Her portion of Mandela effect, friend or foe, is incredible. And she dedicates it to changes in the Schumann resonance and changes to human brainwaves. So, thanks for popping in and being there, Vanessa.
Fascinating. And of course, Jerry has been working on that very same theory with the Schumann resonance as well. And Kimberly, of course, it was an absolute honor and a pleasure to be with all of you. And your art and your stuff and the things that you're putting out in social media can be found on Instagram these days. That's your number one platform, is it not?
Yeah, that's where you can see the artwork is on Instagram, klh.thegallery. And then you can also find me on the web at Kimberly-Lynn Hanson, HANSON.com.
And of course, all three of you coming together for the IMEC.world convention, which a lot of ones coming in from the chat room for all of you folks, coming in from Jerry, Miraz, JoJo's, Josh from Oregon, Ruben Orsorso, as well as lots of ones coming in from Moneybags Room as well. So not just from my top hats off, but the audience as well, all thanking you for taking your time. It's a real pleasure to spend time together. I've enjoyed this so much, and perhaps you'll come on again and we'll do this again sometime.
In the meantime as well, if people are excited, you can always watch last year's presentations, which are online. Jerry, what's the website?
The website is imec.world, or our YouTube is the International Mandela Effect Conference. That is the name of the YouTube channel. You can go watch advertisements for this year's event. You can watch all the speeches from last year. You can watch all the panels from last year's event, as well as all the stuff coming up we got this year. So, guys, go over there, check it out. I really, really appreciate, AJ, you having all three of us on.
Yeah,
Eileen,
thank you
so much for joining us. Kimberly, it's an honor and a pleasure to have both you with us.
I love you guys.
I would like to give a very special shout out to Moneybags. Thank you so much for simulcasting this, being a part of this team also for this year's conference. And a shout out to our webmaster, Fitz. He does an incredible job of keeping that going for us and keeping it updated, getting all the information out. So huge shout outs to everybody. Thank you again, AJ. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure from all of us.
Well, thank you. And
Thanks,
of course, thank you all. And of course, I am super excited myself, and I simply cannot wait for the 2020 East Coast Mandela Effect Conference, Revelations of the Mandela Effect, live streaming in June, perhaps the 5th through the 7th. Stay tuned to their website at imec.world for those details. And a whole host of speakers are going to be taking part in this very unique experience that you've heard a little insight into tonight in this broadcast. And thank you for paying attention and being here and spending this time with us, both in Moneybags channel and the Ripon Rabbit Hole. It's great to see such a strong community of people like yourselves that have interest in finding just where this rabbit hole goes, where it connects, and more important, where it pops up. And I can tell you, it's popping up in June at the International Mandela Effect Conference. We did it! Whee! That's right. We sure did. We spent another Sunday night together. Give yourselves a round of applause for being smart enough to be here. I hope we built some anticipation for the International Mandela Effect Conference taking place this June. Hopefully you're as excited as I am. I take my top hats off once again, and I especially thank all of you, Jerry, Eileen, and Kimberly, for being here with us this evening. We'll be back again next week, starting off the weekend right, Thursday night. And we'll be here every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, bringing you the very best in common sense radio. For many of you, the conversation ends here, but for the Ripon Rabbits, it's just beginning. I'm going to hop on over to the RiponRabbitHole.com. I can't wait to get into the Backstage 24/7 lounge. There's a Cam Chat VIP area there. You can join along as well. You can share your camera, your microphone, and chill with us backstage after the show, where the conversation continues. I hope to see you there. And remember, Saturday, May 2nd, monthly installment of Mandela Monthly with co-host Moneybag73 and special guest Carl Johan Callahan. It's going to be a fantastic evening that Saturday, May 2nd, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. Add it to your calendar, folks. Speaking of the Mandela Effect, of course, Revelations of ME, Revelations of the Mandela Effect, this year's theme for the International Mandela Effect Conference. You can find out additional details, schedule, and a list of all the speakers by visiting imec.world. So wherever you are, good morning, good evening, or good day, whatever the case may be. I'm AJ, the Ripon Rabbit. Until we meet again, take care of yourselves and each other. Good night.
Once there was an old man living in an old house down by the lake. Rumor says the man was hunting for rabbits just for fun. Since the day the rabbit disappeared for a while, then came back and cast a spell over the old man. So he looks like a rabbit too now.
Georgetown. They were wearing Harris tweed and pork pie hats. They'd slit your throat and throw you in the gutter. But it's all you can expect from men like.
They said the future of their pharmaceutical program is to deliver this cell phone technology into your nervous system.
Are you ready to deliver this cell phone technology into your nervous system? Can you imagine what the data plan will be on this? We're talking about swallowing the technology of your cell phone. And we have to look at what 5G brings to the table when you ingest something. So put a 1 in the chat room if you would ingest your data plan, folks. Would you ingest this? Is this something you would consider doing? Put a 1 in the chat room if you're okay with this. Okay? And when you think about this kind of microchip and a pharmaceutical that wants you to be able to ingest this, swallow it like a capsule with a headache. This to me is no, Earth Daughter says. Patrick Roberts, our new timeline, says hell no. Never says maybe it's Mandela. But we have to take a look at what's being discussed. We have to take a look at the world that we're in. We have to put this on today's timeline. Because what is open? What is opening up?